Good morning, everyone. Great to see you again. So I don't just want to reflect about yesterday. I mean, part of my reflection this morning is also about yesterday, and I thank everyone for the excellent first day of the ESPAS conference that we had. But as this ESPAS cycle is coming to a close, I've reflected very much about what I have learned in the last 5 years and also what some of my assumptions were when I started back in 2014. And had anyone told me back then everything that we were going to live through in the next 5 years, I would have never believed it, because so much of what has happened is so unprecedented, so unbelievable. And I was struck yesterday when one of our guests, Nanjira Sambuli from Kenya, she spoke about how the West, I mean, if I understood her correctly, how we are not as resilient as we need to be to this new age of sort of constant disruption. And she made the point on election interference, which is, according to what she said, quite common in Africa and elsewhere, but it didn't really become a huge issue for us until it happened to us in the wake of Cambridge Analytica. And so this lack of resilience, what does it lead to? And we had a discussion also yesterday evening about being resilient to others questioning your assumptions. And it's been very surprising to me how in the course of the last 5 years, when really in many ways I was just doing my job running the internal think tank, which by definition means that you push the intellectual boundaries, you question assumptions, you stress test beliefs, how not resilient many of my colleagues were to me questioning. And all of that really makes me try to find a new concept for what we are living through. And earlier in the year, I heard someone describe what we are living through as the age of impunity. And it was really something that sort of resonated with me, because that's a very different age, because as the global rules-based multilateral order is undermined, the rules of the powerful and the ruthless inevitably become more dominant. What does that mean? Are we prepared for this new age of impunity? How do you ensure that all those with a malign intent don't naturally have the competitive edge, because it is simply not in our nature nor in our mandate to think the unthinkable or to plot the unimaginable? We were simply trained to build things up, not to tear them down. And I think that this age of impunity poses very, very difficult questions to public policy, because in fairness, even our discussions, which are already quite open, still do not touch on everything. And it leaves open, I think, potentially very dangerous voids. I remember well when Julian King, our first commissioner for the Security Union, when he held his first meeting with director generals, and I said to him, you will need a place where you can think the unthinkable. And I offered to be that place. And we need more places like this, places with intellectual and methodological rigor, but also with a rich and vibrant debating culture where we can stress test our assumptions and our ideas. and where we become resilient to others questioning our assumptions and our ideas. We need these spaces. There is too much intellectual conformity in groupthink. And let me say that, again, reflecting on the last 5 years, in public policy, it goes without saying that we cannot constantly, as policy processes get underway, question everything, but there is a moment when we can do so, and that's at the beginning of a policy process, before we initiate a new policy agenda. And I think that it is precisely at this beginning where where foresight in general can have an important role to play. And this is why I have been thinking a lot about how do we do this better at this beginning phase of policy. And what I have thought about is what one could perhaps envision is something like a policy design board. Because you may know in the European Commission we have a regulatory scrutiny board, but that board kicks in when a lot is already underway. So I think that there are ways to perhaps, at the very beginning of a policy process, to really look at, without emotion or politics, at what are the global trends and really what is Europe's place in the world, where do we want to go, and what do we really need to do to get us there, to look at the global best practices. And I think such a policy design board at the beginning of a policy process could really help us to perhaps fill a void that I think currently exists in the policy design. So, and let me also say, reflecting on yesterday, we are, I think, now very, very fortunate that Europe will have a top leader entrusted with foresight. We met him yesterday. It's, of course, Maroš Šefčovič, who is the Vice President designate for interinstitutional relations and foresight. To me, and I said this yesterday evening in his presence, I mean, for ESPAS to all of a sudden have a high-level political figure as a counterparty is a really exciting prospect. And is potentially a catalyst because we all know that unless we have the top-down support and interest, that it's very difficult to sort of mainstream foresight and to bring it into policy processes. So, I mean, I think the expectations are quite high, and it would be very important for me that Europe, through now a vice president of interinstitutional relations and foresight, really try to set sort of a global best practice in how to do foresight and how to improve policy making. Let me also say that I believe that there's really an onus on Europe to do more when it comes to foresight. It's true that some of the discussions that we're having, be it around democracy, the rule of law, the fight against climate change, women's rights, protection of minorities, and also, I think, the necessary renewal of our economic systems. Some of these discussions can be held in Europe, I think, with a greater frankness and openness than perhaps elsewhere in the world right now. And I think that this is very much a call to action to ESPAS, to step it up. I mean, especially this discussion that we also had yesterday around democracy, it's very important that they continue in this age of impunity and that we sit together and we can have the kinds of conversations we had yesterday. And ESPAS is the perfect platform for this, and I really want to see also in the next cycle, want ESPAS to step this up and to really become a place where global leaders can come together to have the kinds of discussions that very, very sadly, I think, one can no longer have in large parts of the world. So that being said, I am excited and look forward to a discussion today on geopolitics, on economy, and society. Some of this was already touched on yesterday, but there's certainly an opportunity today's discussion to go into more depth and really explore these issues that are so vital for our future, and especially, as I said, in this age of impunity, to have a very vigorous and open and honest discourse around these issues. So enjoy the day, and I'll see you, I think, towards the end of the day. But just to say, as the chair of ESPAS, I so appreciate each and every one of you, and I look forward to engaging with you today, and a warm welcome from me this morning. Thank you.